The Grid System Manager is a great tool for setting up and managing grids in both your 3D models and for displaying the grid on your 2D drawings. The example here is two grids defined, one for an existing station building and a second for a new roof canopy over the platform area. But what determines the look of the grid? The color, the line style, fonts used, and so on. If I open the settings for each grid, we'll see that there is a grid template that is set to default. This is the template delivered with OpenBuildings Designer, and it controls the symbology of grids. But what if you need to customize the grid for your own drawing standards? Perhaps you want the grid lines a different color, or on a different level, or you want the bubbles a different size, or a different shape, or you use a different text font. And if I switch to an elevation drawing, this not only displays grid lines and bubbles, but also the floor lines and elevations. The display of the floor lines is also controlled by a grid template. If I open the Floor Manager and select Settings, I'll see that the elevation template is also set to the default grid template. Note that while each grid definition can point to a different grid template, only one elevation template can be defined for the WorkSet. So how do you create your own custom grid template? Grid templates are element templates that are stored in a DgnLib. That DgnLib can be stored in your company or organization level dataset, a WorkSpace dataset, or the WorkSet dataset. If I expand the Resources tab on the Explorer, I can find the element templates being used as a resource for this WorkSet. If I hover over that gridtemplate.dgnlib, I can see the full path, so I'm going to open that file. Note that a quick way to navigate to that file location is to find the directory or folder using a config variable. Selecting the variable tfdir will open the delivered dataset, which is dataset NM in this case. Here I want to select the DgnLib folder. Now I may need to change the extension to see the DgnLibs. Now I can select the grid template.dgnlib. Again, I'll find the element templates in Explorer and right press and select Manage. This opens the element template dialog. Here we can see all the settings that are controlling the grid and elevation annotations. I could simply change the settings here, but that means I am changing the delivered DgnLib, and I risk overwriting my customizations on the next update if I don't back up correctly. So I'm going to show you how to copy the DgnLib to another location so that you have your own custom grid template DgnLib. We'll close the dialog and go to the backstage to do a Save As. Now, where do I save my new DgnLib? Again, I will use a config variable to find the correct location. There are three variables that should point to locations where different levels of standards are stored. BB Dataset Organization Filter points to a company standards location. BB Dataset Workspace Filter points to the location of WorkSpace standards. And BB Dataset WorkSet folder points to the location of WorkSet standards. I'll select the WorkSet filter and store my DgnLib in the WorkSet. Now I will select the DgnLib folder. Before saving the file, I will rename it by adding a suffix to define this as the project DgnLib. It is good practice to always keep the original name of the DgnLib and add a suffix to identify it as customized. Now that I'm in the new DgnLib, I can customize the template. I'll start by renaming it so I can identify it when I need to select it. I'm actually going to create two templates, one for the new construction and a second one for existing construction. So I will name this one Project New. Let's start with some changes to the elevation annotations. I won't change very much here. I just want to set it to use the project text style I have defined, change the text size, and the offset above the floor line. Now let's go to the grid annotations. I'm going to change the radius of the bubbles and the text used in the bubbles to label the grids. Now currently, the color, style, and weight of the bubbles are defined by the bi-level properties of the S-grid anno level. So I could simply modify those level properties to change how the grid annotations appear on the drawings. Or I can overwrite those properties by setting the level, style, and color in the template. Either way works. It really depends on how you want to manage it. But for the purpose of this demo, I will override the bi-level properties here so that we can see the effect of the template. I'll leave the grid label mask as is. That just masks out any line work that would be behind the grid bubbles on the drawing. The grid leaders just define offsets. I'll leave those as is. Again, I'm going to override the bi-level properties of the grid lines in order to change the display. Note that you can have different attributes for major and minor grid lines. This means I could put the minor grid lines on a different level that could then be turned off on some drawings. And I could change their color so that they're easily identifiable. Now I'm going to copy this template and create a second template for existing construction. For the grid bubbles on the existing grids, I would like to use a hexagon rather than a circle. To do that, I can select a cell. I created this cell in an existing cell library on the default level using the bi-level attributes with the origin at the center of the hexagon. I will change the color to a gray and then do the same for the grid lines. Now I can close the element template dialog. All I need to do now is tell the software to use this grid template rather than the default one. To do this, I have to edit a configuration file. Let's go to the backstage. Note that the project grid template is the first in the list of recent files. I can right-click and open the folder in File Explorer. This will open the DgnLib folder for this WorkSet. I'm going to move up to the WorkSets folder. Here I will find the WorkSet configuration files. Make sure to select the config file that has the same name as the WorkSet folder and open it in a text editor. Also, since users do not typically modify configuration files, you may not have the privileges to do this, in which case you should contact your CAD administrator. I will just type in the configuration variable for the grid template and set the path. I will type bb underbar grid underbar template underbar DgnLib. Then use an equal sign and then add the path using a variable that already defines the location of the WorkSet standards, which is underbar USTN underbar WorkSet standards. Then add the DgnLib folder and the name of the new DgnLib. Now, if you are running Update 8, you will need to add a second microstation variable that was added to define the location of element templates. You want to be sure that it includes the new grid template. So this is ms underbar DgnLib list underbar element templates. Then use a greater than sign to append the existing list and add the variable just defined for the grid template DgnLib. Double check that there are no typos, and I do have one, so let me fix that. Now, save and close the text editor. Since we modified a configuration file, we will need to exit OpenBuildings and then reopen. Note that the grid now appears as black lines with no attributes. This is because they are currently set to use a template that can no longer be found. I'll open the Grid System Manager and select the Platform Grid. Open Settings and set the template to Project New. I can save these settings as the default settings, which means all new grids created will use this template. I could also apply to all grid systems, which would apply it to existing grid systems. Now I will select the station grid and set it to use the grid template for existing construction. Now I see the two different grid symbologies displayed in the model. Let's open the plan drawing, and the grid updates to the new symbology. Note the hexagon bubbles and the gray grid lines on the existing building grid, and the circular bubbles and the red grid lines on the new building grid. Now let's take a look at the elevation drawing. Now the symbology is not yet updated here. That is because we still need to update the template for the floors. I'll just open the Floor Manager and go to Settings and change the template to Project New. Apply and close the dialog. Now if it doesn't appear that the floor elevations have updated, I like to open the reference presentation and turn off floor lines. This should leave no floor lines on the drawing. If it doesn't, delete anything left behind, and then turn the floor lines back on. Now everything is as defined by the templates. Let's just take a look at the sheet. That looks great. Matches up with my drawing standards.
If you found this video helpful, please give it a like. If you want to see more such series, consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you, and see you next time.